All right, welcome to the RatCast, one of your favorite ESO PvP podcasts. I'm Icy with Icyfire Gaming, and today we have Shoddy. How you doing, Shoddy?
Hello there.
And we have Candle. How you doing, Candle?
Greetings, adventurers.
Okay. And before we jump into the show, a quick announcement. We do have the audio version of the podcast. So if you want to listen to that without any visuals, anything like that, you can head over to Anchor. I always put a link in the description below so you can go check it out. And we have the first 3 episodes there, which are pretty interesting. So definitely would recommend checking it out if you haven't, if you like what you're listening to today. So with that announcement complete, let's jump into today's topic, which the general topic is healer theory. So if you're a dedicated PvP healer, then this is going to be the episode and possibly future episodes because I might turn it into a series just for you.
Theories within the series.
Series within the series, yes. And, well, I know I kind of teased it last week, but before we jump into that, Oakensoul. Okay, because I'm going to be doing like my own little Oakensoul video that's coming out next week for PvP healers, and I've been testing it a lot today with my DK and my Necro healer, having a ton of fun. Oh my goodness, it's mostly like the alt gen that allows me to just spam my alts as much as I want, and what I normally do is just throw on a bunch of healing abilities, and then I have like a damage ultimate or whatever. Obviously, it really just changes, depends on who's in the match for the solo queue stuff. But I just spam my Colossus, spam my DK ult, whatever it is I'm using, and I can probably do about like maybe over 15 minutes, maybe 15, 16, 17 Colossus. Just throw them down at will. And for me, that's fun. Shoddy, do you have Oakensoul? I know Candle doesn't.
I did not buy the chapter, so no.
Oh my goodness. I guess we can't even have this conversation.
Well, I can give opinions on like what it's doing and how I think the performance of it overall is on healers.
Okay,
So,
yes. So at least I guess my final perspective is right now I'm having a lot of fun, and I think it's fun for solo queue, and that's kind of where it ends right there. I haven't tested it in like the pre-made stuff that we do on the Friday, Saturday, so I can't really say anything about it. But what are your thoughts so far, Shawty?
well, I haven't seen anyone in BG's pre-mades included do anything exceptional with it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the main selling point for it as a healer is going to be the ult gen. The idea being that you're going to get more healing ultimates.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the other bonuses don't really have merit. Like it gives some of the minor recoveries, and it gives a lot of things that healers don't need, like major force, major brutality, or not brutality. Sorry, the
Berserk.
berserk. Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of that stuff goes completely wasted on healers.
totally.
And then even when you account for like a warden healer, warden healers have access to the minor resources and night blades because they got that update on their
Yep.
path.
Yep. Refreshing path. Yep.
Yeah, so a lot of these buffs are going wasted on healers. So besides the, ultimate gen, there's not really much that you're gaining. There is
Yeah,
crit. There's crit, like chance. There's crit chance. But
I
you
think
can make
I
a
think
crit chance. Go ahead.
that's one of the major strengths that we see in the Oakensoul builds too, is the crit-based offense. So that being one of the major strengths of Oakensoul builds, losing that by making an Oakensoul healer, I feel like you lose a lot of the oomph from an Oakensoul build, especially because I think all healers need to have the most powerful heals that you're ever going to get on a healer on any build are going to be hots. And you need to have your hots. And once you've got hots, you also need one other thing, which is a emergency heal. And the danger of the Oakensoul build is you have very limited space. So can you actually fit hots on your build and a burst emergency heal?
Well, you can, but I don't think it's enough Most of my healing builds tend to run like 7, sometimes even 8 healing abilities on, both bars.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are using Oakensoul, of course, you're limited to 1 bar. You don't have to worry about armor abilities, which is fine for most classes. But you do have to worry about like roots and snares, so it's pretty much mandatory that you're running Race
Race.
Against Time
Yep.
as with all builds.
Yeah.
So that leaves you with 4 slots. One of them has to be a burst heal. So at most, you've only got 3 hots. Of course, it's pretty much mandatory that you run Radiating Regen and Echoing Vigor. Those are just hands down some of the strongest healing over time that you can cast in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so that leaves you with like what, 1 flex spot, depending maybe on your class or
Yeah.
whatever you want. There's
And
just a lot of missed opportunity.
and that burst heal, are we just all talking about the Blessing of Restoration, the second ability on the resto stuff?
Not necessarily. So for sorcerers, you could easily go with Bird, the Twilight Matriarch.
Mm-hmm.
That I think is a good substitute and potentially superior in some cases.
Yeah,
For
what are our
healing.
choices? On the sorcerer, you've got the bird heal. You could use a resto ulti with low cost on the sorcerer and the alt gen on a sorcerer. You might be able to get away with just using the resto ulti as your burst heal. Or you then have, I guess you could use shields if you wanted to go that route, or you could go with the resto staff abilities like healing ward, or like you said, the blessing of restoration. I think that's pretty much your limit on the sorcerer.
You
Mm-hmm.
could do that stuff, but in reality, you're probably just going to do Bird, Resto Alt, and you're going to be
Likely.
doing like, yes, that's another good thing is like the ult's cheap on the sorcerer, so you're going to be getting the ults more quickly with the Oakensoul. If you look at other classes for burst heals, um, a
Nightblade?
lot of yeah, you could look at Nightblade, you could look at Templar, and Necro's a little different because it has some options, but like for those two specifically, their weakness is that their burst heals are single target, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not really ideal. So, in a 1 bar scenario, they would probably use Blessing of Restoration.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually one of the reasons why I kind of like the Warden a lot, because you have some interesting options with pots that double as a burst heal, with budding seeds being able to be recasted, or you just let it wear off and it has a big burst heal at the end. But
Mm-hmm.
more specifically with Living Trellis, because Living Trellis, it doubles as a hot, but also as a pseudo burst heal if you recast it. And
Yeah,
that's very effective when you're very limited on bar space.
yeah, it kind
And
of has that
I
double
don't think that
purpose.
there's any other there's no other skills, I don't believe, other than sort of the frost Arctic Blast, but it's not nearly the same as Living Trellis. And
Well,
Arctic
Really?
Blast,
You think so?
yeah,
You think Living Trellis is a better burst heal or a better hot? Well, not hot. We'll say burst heal because Arctic Blast, the hot in Arctic Blast is very pitiful. So you think
Photo.
the is it confirmed like the tooltip on Living Trellis, like I guess the burst heal at the end is actually better than Arctic Blast or Polar Winds?
It it's not stronger, but it's a lot cheaper, and the heal over time is actually stronger.
yes. So it's a
Mm,
little bit different. The heal over time is stronger, it lasts longer, and it's going to give you, of course, it's going to give you your green balance passives, which is really, really important. But no, you are right. The burst heal portion of it on Polar Wind and Arctic is literally twice as strong as the end burst heal of Living Trellis,
I would
but Trellis is a lot cheaper and has a lot of other effects.
I'd say it's more like a 60 to 70% stronger, not really twice. I actually rate Polo Wind kind of low in terms of like burst
I would
heals.
agree. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it.
Yeah, I'm just kind of stuck with it. But I
But
guess so. When you say you rate it low, are you talking with burst heals within the Warden class, or just like in all of the burst heals in the game?
when looking at burst heals as a whole,
Okay.
I would agree.
but
Yeah.
I actually, so you brought up like there's not many abilities that kind of fit that dual purpose like budding seeds, but there
Right.
actually is, and it's
Okay,
something I've
let's
been
lane them.
using it recently. A healer that could benefit from Oakensoul pretty, decently would be the Necro healer, because it does actually have a very good AoE burst heal that also has a heal over time, and that's
Renewing. Yeah.
enduring undeath. I wouldn't use renewing.
Mm-hmm.
Renewing will just get your team killed by plague break. I've tested it, and it did in fact wipe my team once, and I'm never using it again.
Oh yeah. No, I've done it myself as well.
So yeah, you use enduring undeath, but it's actually pretty good. It's what the old Blessing of Restoration was before it got changed. Blessing of Restoration now heals for more, but the cost increase was by like 1,400. And if you look at Enduring Undeath, it's actually 1,400 less, and it's relative to the range of what the old Blessing of Restoration was. So it's actually the old Blessing of Restoration, but when there's a corpse, you also get a 5 second or longer, depending on how many corpses, heal over time on the ground. And it's a pretty big circle too. So
yeah.
Yeah, the hot is really strong.
it's a very powerful healing ability. And that's a good option. The other option is resistant flash, but it's single target, costs a lot more.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting when you look at the Warden and the Necro, both between like budding seeds and what was it, enduring undeath. They're just kind of like the opposites, right? Where the Warden it starts out as a hot and then it ends with a burst heal, whereas the Necro it starts as a burst heal and then of course if you hit a corpse then it turns into a hot afterward.
Yeah, it's very nice actually.
So you think it functions better, or you would prefer a burst heal to start rather than at the end?
Yes, in terms of an Oakensoul build, I would say that Enduring Undeath is superior to Budding Seeds, just because you can use it more GCDs. Maybe that's a weird way to say it. Basically, you can use 2 Enduring Undeaths per 2 GCDs, whereas Budding Seeds can only get 1 burst heal per 2 GCDs, because you have to cast it and then recast it to get the immediate burst heal.
Whereas with Necro, you can just cast it twice and you're going to get 2 burst heals in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess back to burst heals real quick. So I know the Sorc has their AoE burst heal, and we're talking 2 other AoE burst heals, one on the budding seeds and one with the enduring undeath. When you guys are, I guess, pertaining to this, are we looking at where we want, we would desire AoE burst heals because we're obviously team oriented, right? Whereas I'm pretty sure, well, the Templar has an AoE burst heal, the DK kind of, sort of.
You want to be a good healer in PvP content. If you're not soloing, if you're healing other people and it's more than one person, like if you're healing 2 or 3 people, you're in a battleground, there's literally 4 people on your team. I think we should use that as like the starting point of being a healer. So when you're in a situation like that, if you really want to say you're a healer, when you go from single target healers, like if you're a Necromancer using resistant flesh, though resistant flesh is absolutely awesome, there's a big change once you go into using AoE burst heals, because you're completely capable of saving your entire team in moments where there's alt dumps, where another team is dropping like a Colossus bomb and they're just doing so much damage in a short period of time. When you've got AoE burst heals, that's when you can really save the show. You can save your team single-handedly with AoE burst heals while you've got HOTS lingering around.
So, Candle, when you were saying emergency burst heals in the beginning, you're strictly talking from, I guess, because when I think emergency burst heals, I'm thinking of a burst heal that's going to help me survive, not necessarily my team. But with the Oaken Soul context, you're talking from an AoE perspective then, right?
So there's basically what we're looking at is like the efficiency, how much over time healing you get. You get certain amount of healing numbers for the amount of magicka or stamina that you're spending. And typically the absolute most healing over time that you're going to get for limited quantities of magicka and stamina cost, it's always going to be in hots. And you can have multiple hots rolling at any time. So like the AoE version of your healing Cinder Storm on a DK, or in the resto tree, you've got so many hot options. You've got literally the first two skills, the healing springs, radiating regeneration. Those are amazing hots, and you just have these things running. They're very low cost, but they put out tremendous numbers of healing over time, and they cost barely nothing. And as long as people are not taking massive quantities of damage and dying, then you can just keep those hots rolling, and you can keep tremendous amounts of healing pouring out of your healer. But of course, when shit hits the fan and a Necro drops his DC Colossus, or somebody has a good combo, they pop their Shulks, they hit a Dawnbreaker and a Spin to Win in one moment, and they're just flattening people with massive quantities of damage in short periods of time, that's when your hots, they're not going to be able to keep up. And that's when your emergency burst heals are more expensive, and they're like, you cast it and it's one big burst blast of healing, but it's an expensive spell. And if you try to just have a healer that's just focused on burst heals, perfect example is a Sork who just has their bird. And if you're running around as a Sork on your bird heals and you're just casting your bird heals, you're not going to have any time to do anything else. You're literally just casting your bird heal over and over and over again. And a lot of mag Sorks actually get stuck in that rotation because they can feel the power of the bird burst heal, because it is a very good AoE burst heal and it's very powerful. But if you're on a mag Sork and you get just stuck casting those bird heals, you're basically turning yourself into a healer. It does have a lot of effect, but you're stuck just doing burst heals, burst heals, burst heals. And if you can just throw in some hots like radiating regen or any of the hots that are available to you, then you're really going to step up your game as a healer.
Interesting.
I feel like
And I
that
think
was,
most healers know that, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. In fact, that was a little off topic about the Oakensoul, but that's okay. Basically, I would say that when it comes to Oakensoul, you probably want a AoE burst heal, because that's, when you're playing group content, it's pretty necessary.
Yeah.
And you should be looking for the classes that are capable of doing that.
Yeah, because
Which ones are not? Which ones are not?
I guess all of them are because of resto staff, but
well,
Yep.
and I guess that's kind of like how I think about it, because I know when we were kind of talking about the tier list, Shadi, maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, you know, I guess, you know, that we're gonna slowly get into the Templar thing, but you know, when looking at classes, I try to look at it from like what their whole class kit offers for like a healer.
yeah.
And when I think of, I was kind of just going through it today. Like, I know you're a Sork main, right? Is that safe to say?
Not necessarily. I main a lot of different classes. It's mostly whatever is best for the kind of content that I currently want to do. So, like, for instance, I've been playing nothing but Necro Healer for a few weeks now because I've been focusing on high-end premades and as the primary healer. So I do that. Before then, I played Sork for like a couple of months, and then before that, I played, a Nightblade healer, and then I was a Templar main for years before that. So, I just different stuff.
Okay, all right. So I guess we're just gonna jump into it then. Would you rate the Sork above the Templar then?
So the Sork. I would say that I would rather have a Sork healer than a Templar healer.
Jesus Christ. Well, because okay, so let me I guess get through my point here. So the reason why I asked that right there is because when I look at like the Sork, like we'll say the healing
Mhm.
kit that it offers, I only see two, maybe three abilities. And, the Sork, it doesn't have a dedicated healing subclass like the Warden, the Necro, the Templar. You can even go as far as like the DK. And I guess the Nightblade, you can kind of consider that like a healing subclass as well. But the Sork, it only has the Twilight Matriarch, which is part of like a pet subclass, not really a healing one. And then it's got the what do you call that? Is it Power Surge or Crit Surge? Whichever one. What's the? I think
Surge.
it's Power Surge. Is that the healing one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's got Power Surge and like the Electric subclass, Twilight Matriarch and the Pet subclass, and so that's two healing type abilities. And then of course you got the negate if you pick the healing one, but I don't really
Yes.
count that exactly. And then when you look at the Templar, it's got a fully loaded, 5 abilities and an ultimate, all dedicated towards healing and
Yeah.
utility, that type of thing. So when you were saying, when you were like, yeah, Templar is the worst healer, in the game by far, I was just like, what is he talking about? But I figured it'd make a great conversation, so I kind of want to
Yeah.
hear what you have to say about this
Right.
because I'm a little
I'll
confused.
I'll address the Sorcerer part first.
Okay.
So the reason the Sorcerer is actually a good healer, I mean, straight up, the first reason is the bird is one of the best first heals in the game. Yes,
Yeah.
it does not have a lot of targets. It's 2, so it's similar to Polar Wind. But the thing is that its tooltip is much higher and the range is much longer.
Is
Another
it
thing
28
is,
meters on the range?
I
Yes.
believe so. The thing is that you also don't have to aim it, and because it requires to be on both bars, you don't have to worry about what bar you're on and what even you're doing when somebody gets low, when somebody's being bursted down or focused. You could be doing anything. You could be doing like your armor buff, your healing, heal over time rotation. You could be doing a streak negate combo to try to finish somebody off for your team, and somebody just suddenly drops 50%. And that very second you see it, you just hit that bird heal. You don't have to think about swapping bars. You don't have to think about anything. You just do it. And it's so fast and effective without really being overly costly either. I mean, it's kind of costly, but it's so powerful and effective.
Yeah, because
that
you do lose a global rotation if you change bars, because every time you swap bars, that could have been a light attack and a global.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So
now, yes,
what about the fact that your matriarch can actually die?
dying matriarch is a minor problem, but it's not so much a problem that I get worried about it. I've played Sorcerer in high-end games for a very long time, and I have still gotten good success with it, even with dying matriarch.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing to address is that, yeah, it doesn't have any skill heals, but the thing is there is a lot of good healing abilities outside of classes. You've got orbs, you've got echoing vigor,
Mm-hmm.
radiating regen, and
Yeah.
all other things that kind of fill in the gaps. The other thing about Sorcerer is it's actually a good defensive healer in a different way. It has good passives for like extra HP, so it's easy to get higher hit points than, say, the Templar, for example, who doesn't have any modifiers to max stat. It's very fast with the Hurricane. You're making a complete mistake if you put on Shoot On. You should be running Hurricane and just going for maximum speed with streaks and movement speed, and just being completely incapable of being tied down. Because the best thing about healing over time and about the bird heal is that you don't have to be near your allies to still allow them to benefit to the heals. You can be streaking around and, avoiding damage that your opponents are throwing at you, but still be in range of your allies to, have those heals on them. The healing over time you probably put on them when you passed by them. The bird is long range. You don't even have to look at them. You can be on the run from somebody who's chasing you down while also healing somebody who's being targeted by another person at the same time. Like, you can literally multitask your survival and your allies' survival without even looking at them. So it's a very different style of gameplay, but I think it's very powerful still.
Okay.
There's a lot of interesting passives that the Sorcerer has that aren't necessarily directed at healing, but they're extremely valuable passives for any build that you're running. And they're things that you need to build into as a healer. For example, health and stamina recovery boosted by 20%, and mag recovery boosted by 10%. That's an incredibly large amount of boosted recovery.
Another thing is ults are reduced by 15%.
Yep.
When you block an attack, your next ability is reduced by 10-15% in cost.
Yep.
That has no cooldown. There's a lot
Minor
of
prophecy.
things. Yeah, minor prophecy, so more crit chance, crits being one of the most powerful types of healing that you can do in the game, or it is really.
Yeah.
Because it's 50% or higher, unmitigated. There's no way your opponents can, change that. It's not like crit damage where you have crit resist. Crit healing is always 50%.
They get boosted weapon spell damage, which is very good. And they also get boosted max 8% health.
They're also
8%.
Yeah, they're also very good utility-wise for the team. Like, the healer isn't just a healer when you're using a Sorc. You can use negates for combos. You can use streak as your team's primary offensive and defensive strategy for stunning people.
On a full healing Sorc, just slotting negate and streak allows you to add a very, very dangerous combo into your DPS, your friends that are doing your DPS. If they're doing some kind of an alt dump, all of a sudden you have a absolutely fantastic and dangerous miniature combo, just adding in a negate into a streak. That adds a extremely dangerous element to your friends' offensive combo that will get people killed.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think we could all agree that, the moment, the one team that has a Sorc on their team and they're throwing negates all the time, they're probably gonna win, just because negate, that silence is so powerful of a skill with how much utility it brings.
They're certainly much more dangerous. And the negate can also be used defensively too. People are pretty hesitant to walk through negates.
Yeah, because especially if you're a magic user, you can't use any of your abilities.
Can we compare some of those passives to the Templar passives? The healing
right.
passives?
I felt like we kind of covered the Sorc, and so now we should address why I think the Templar is one of, if not the worst healers in the game.
So, okay. So before you jump over there, for the Sorc, those passives that you mentioned, those seem nice to help increase your character stats with the recovery and the max health and things like that. And I think from looking at the Templar passives, those more, I guess sticking, true to the topic here, those are kind of more they help benefit you more from a healing perspective, not so much your character stats, right? And I do understand, don't get me wrong, I think all classes can play healers, blah blah blah. I'm just kind of helping make the conversation a little bit more spicy and interesting.
Advocate.
Yeah. So I don't come in here acting like I don't know nothing, but I guess looking at it from that perspective, there's a lot of utility, of course, that comes with being a healer, right? And the Templar, I think, definitely offers, I guess, more healing benefits, right? Where, stepping in your own, one of your abilities, like the ritual or the rune focus, that's going to give you minor mending. And the only sources of minor mending in the game are the Templar, the Nightblade, and if you're wearing the Healer's Habit set. Otherwise, you can't get minor mending. You can't get that minor buff anywhere else. But
Yeah, you can get it on the Necro as well.
I have a huge pet peeve about something that you just said, and it's just a personal thing. After playing Templar for like years, one of my biggest pet peeves with that thing that you just mentioned about the minor mending, which drives me fucking nuts, and Shadi knows this because I've talked about it before. Extended Ritual, fantastic ability. Imagine this scenario. Imagine you're 1vxing or you're in a little group and you're kiting. You've got some really dangerous people trying to kill you, and you're kiting, repositioning, and you're moving as fast as you can, kiting as fast as you can. Has that ever happened to you? Is this a scenario that you've ever been in?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's happened to me many times. You drop your extended ritual, you purge all of your effects, and you think, oh, great, I'm also getting my minor mending while I'm kiting. Actually, no, you don't. You don't get your minor mending. If you're moving at full speed, and I would encourage you to test this yourself. Try moving at full speed on your character, drop your extended ritual, and by the time you get out of your extended ritual, go into your character sheet and see if your minor mending is there. It won't be, because you don't get it if you're moving and you don't actually stop and sit in your extended ritual.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, my understanding was you only get it if you're healing from within the ritual. The moment you leave, then it drops out. It was more like a build your house type of thing.
It stays on you for a few seconds, but the problem that he's saying is that when you drop the ritual, so there's a lot of fights, there's a lot of scenarios.
It's 4 seconds.
4 seconds, yep.
When you don't have time to stay in the ritual, right? And you drop your ritual or you drop your little rune, but you're not getting your minor mending. You're not benefiting from it when you do that.
And that minor mending is very valuable. Like, that's a really important part of the Templar. It might be one of the best parts of the Templar passives is that minor mending. That 8% is a big deal.
If you compare that to Necro, who only has to have any negative effect on them, they get their 8% that way. It doesn't mean that they have to use resistant flesh and defile themselves. Literally any enemy negative effect on them will actually activate that passive. Or if you look at the Nightblade, they could just randomly fire off their burst heal once every 8 seconds and they get theirs. These are both much more easily accessible minor mendings than what the Templar has, because they are able to use it while on the move. And healing, being powerful while on the move, is almost more important than healing that is powerful when you are standing still.
Yeah.
So,
because in high-end PvP, like, you need to move.
Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The other thing that I have a problem with Extended Ritual is it's very expensive. It's rightfully very expensive. But the problem is that a lot of abilities are priced based on what they do. Extended Ritual has a very long duration. So what ends up happening is, because you move around so much in PvP, you're getting, maybe like 5-6 seconds of that duration when you paid for the full, 20-24 seconds.
Right.
Yeah. I actually, believe it or not, there are many times on my Templar that I prefer slotting Illustrious Healing from the Resto staff, which is the AoE ground-based heal. I will literally slot Illustrious Healing before I slot Extended Ritual.
Oh, really?
Well, I would assume that you probably use both, but still. There's other things about the Templar too, so going over them.
And before we go with that, so when you guys talk about the minor mending on the Necro, it's not actually labeled minor mending. It's just like it's a unique 6 to 8% that they get. So
it's 8.
So it's 8% when they have a debuff on them.
Yeah.
So that it's the same amount as minor mending, but it doesn't count as minor mending. So they could still, if they were going to throw on Healer's Habit, they would get an additional 8%.
Well, that just means that it's better.
Oh yeah. If they get a unique buff, that would still stack with a minor mending if they do that set on. Right. Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, if anything, it almost you stand to make the claim that Necro might be the best PvP healer because you're inundated with debuffs all the time, and the debuffs just make the Necro stronger with its heals.
Right.
Yeah.
It is a very powerful healer.
Oh yeah. No,
but
no argument there. But the Templar, go ahead. Yep.
right. So the Templar passives, I don't have like a page pulled up right now, but there's actually not that many that go into the healing. It's mostly the healing tree, and then
The first passive is called Mending. It increases the healing effect from your Templar Restoring Light abilities, all your abilities in that tree. It increases them by up to 12% in proportion to the severity of the target's wounds. So they can be increased by up to 12%. That's actually a pretty decent one.
Well, it is, but it's also not that impactful because you really shouldn't. I mean, you can, but you really shouldn't be relying solely on the on the Templar burst heal.
Yeah.
Which one? The Honor of the Dead or the Ritual of
Honor
Rebirth?
of the Dead. I don't really think the other one's worth using.
The AoE one?
Hasty Prayer.
Well, I don't. The AoE one is not worth using at all. But then also the other morph of Honor of the Dead is also not worth using.
Breath of Life.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I always use Honor of the Dead.
Yeah. In most cases, a Templar should just be using Blessing of Restoration. It's just better. It's the same issue with any of the other single target burst heals. You're burst healing one guy and two more people are in trouble, and then one of them ends up dying.
Well, if anything, I guess I'll try to compare it. Ritual of Rebirth. Not the Hasty Prayer, but the Ritual of Rebirth one, just because it can actually heal one person outside of the little radius that it has. You could kind of count that one burst heal like equivalent to the Matriarch. Of course, the Matriarch, it's AoE and it'll hit, I think, 2 targets or whatever. But this one, at least it hits 1. And that's, if we're talking like actual pre-mades and stuff, we're always going to be together. We're very rarely is somebody going to be split. And if somebody happens to be outside of that radius, then, they're going to get a guaranteed hit. Obviously, if you have 2 people outside the radius, then only one of them is going to get it. But
it's still extremely costly.
I think it's like 5K.
Yeah,
it's more expensive, and it is significantly weaker than the bird heal.
Yeah,
it's almost a third weaker.
But
in terms of the tooltip,
yes.
Oh Jesus!
My point was though is that passive that Candle mentioned is really only benefiting extended ritual, unless. The only other argument that you could make is that you put the Templar burst heal on one bar and Blessing of Restoration on the other bar if you have the room to do that. But otherwise, you're not really using any other skills in that tree. You could argue the ultimate, but that ultimate's okay in more casual scenarios, but it's not that great in a more high-end PvP situation. Resto Ult just outperforms it by far.
Yeah. Yep, 100%.
So essentially what we're getting to is that the Templar passives, even though they have a complete tree that's dedicated to the healing, these passives aren't actually giving you that much. And we haven't even talked about the third and the fourth passive. The fourth passive is literally increased resurrection speed. So you've already lost your teammates. Your job as a healer, you've already failed and they died. And now you can bring them back to life if your enemies don't interrupt you. I don't like that passive. That's not really great. I want to be a good healer first and save my teammates from dying in the first place.
But sometimes you can't stop an Oakensoul Nightblade, right?
Yep.
And then in that moment, this would help out. And of course, I will agree here where it is, it doesn't really benefit you. It's like the Avengers, right? Why can't we do something pre-Avengers or something before they died?
There's a set in the game that increases your resurrection speed.
Kagranek's
And
Hope.
I think that's correct, and I think it benefits you when you get a res off. You get like a buff, right?
So Kagranek's Hope will just increase your speed, but if you want like a buff to it, then you want to use, I think it's called Vestaris. That will actually give you, what is it called? I think minor or major heroism when you successfully res that person, for both you and that person.
Yeah, I think that if you use one of those sets that increases your resurrection speed and you're on a Templar, you can actually get your res speed to be pretty damn fast, and you can actually pull off some really sneaky resurrections.
You want to know who can res the fastest, though?
A Necro.
I was gonna say, just throw the and he can res 3 people up at the same time.
Yeah, he can res 3 people instantly. Now, of course, that cost is an ult, but you just put Resto ult on the back bar, Necro res ult on the, or Necro res on the front, Resto ult on the back.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that would be, faster, better. Can't really counter it. They're gonna get rezzed whether they like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that 4th passive that the Templar has is not very good. It's kind of cool sometimes. You get some bonus res speed, but in reality, it's not that great in comparison to other passives that other classes have. And then, of course, the 3rd passive is when you heal an ally under 50%, you grant them 2 ulti generation. That's okay. That has some value.
It's okay.
But it's only with your restoring light abilities from that Templar tree that we listed. So
outside of that tree, the only other passive that benefit from the healer playstyle is the 5% on ults and stamina and magicka.
Right, from the Dawn's Wrath tree.
But basically, my argument against Templar is that it's too slow. Its abilities are too immobile. Its burst heal is inferior to other burst heals, including the Blessing of Restoration. And it doesn't have that great of passives overall when you really break it down. And it's just clunky.
Yeah. I agree. The only thing that I like about the Templar is if you're playing a brawly Templar and you use extended ritual because you're planning on staying in that area and fighting somebody in that area. That's the only thing I really like about the Templar.
Templar is basically only useful for extended ritual as a healer. There's no other reason to play a Templar.
I guess, at least looking at the first 3 passives, right? We'll say the 4th one, it's really just for a gimmick if you want to make a resurrection build and a utility type of thing. We'll just kind of leave that spec as an exception. But for the first 3, I'd almost say that, well, if you were really doubling down on all of the abilities, right? Because all those 3 passives, they're geared just towards the Templar, that restoring light subclass. If you actually spec for it, well, I don't want to say spec for it, but if say you were using, we'll say 3 to 4 of the abilities in the Templar class, then it might be worth it to actually use it, right? Because if you're playing a Templar, you have 3 passives that's going to boost your skills, but then you're only going to use 1 ability. That doesn't really seem worth it to me.
Well, the rune is for yourself, and you're not going to get healing from it very often. Extended Ritual is a good ability, and then the heal is okay if you plan to slot 2 burst heals, 1 on each bar.
Mm-hmm.
The ult is not worth using. The whole I get max armor while I use this ult, bad idea, because players know that when you're channeling that ult, you can't block, and block is a much superior form of mitigation than just getting max armor. So you'll often just get dogpiled on as soon as you start using it because they know you can't block. Unless you stop channeling and waste your ult, you can't block, and you are susceptible to dying while
Yeah,
channeling it.
we've all seen people literally die while channeling their practiced
So
incantation.
that whole like I get all this armor while using it, wasted, not useful.
It's funny because of course I agree with you guys here, but I tell people this all the time, but they insist that either practice incantation or remembrance, right, whichever morph you're using, is leagues better than Life Giver, and I'm just like, I can't talk to this guy. These guys are just ridiculous right now.
Life Giver is better than both of them, and Remembrance is even worse than practiced incantation, because at least in practice you can move now.
There's one place where I could see why people would say that they're really good, and it's in raids. That is where practice incantation might have a lot of value, because it's healing a ton of people.
It's very good in Zergy situations. If you've got 30 dudes, doesn't it hit all 30 of them?
Oh.
Does it have a target limit even?
I don't know.
Because I've seen it hit a lot of people at once, and that's like the one situation where this thing's pretty good.
I don't think there's a limit.
In a lot of cases, a lot of other cases, it's really bad. But yes, it is very good when you're zerging around. But I view zerging as a very low tier PvP playstyle.
And again, in the raids, sure, if you're doing PvE and you're raiding into trials, okay, sure, maybe it's fine there. But I don't know if that's what we care about. I believe we're all PvPers, and I believe this podcast is for PvPers.
Yes.
So that's that ability is kind of mute here.
Yeah. So if you're zergling, there you go.
Yeah. I thought another potential use case for that ultimate was if you're going to make the sacrificial play, right, and we're all running away from the Zerg, it's like, all right, I got this, boys. You hit the rite of passage. you stand your ground while everybody else is running for their life, and then everybody just dogpiles you, and then of course you're dead. But hey, you bought your team an extra 4 to 8 seconds of whatever.
That's actually not the case, because like I said, you're less tanky than if you were blocking. So if you were blocking and spamming Honor the Dead, you would last longer. Or if you're, something else, you could be a Sorc, you could just streak around while spamming Bird. If you're a Necro, you get extra armor from resistance, while also being healed by your Mender. Other scenarios with other classes, but even in that scenario, it's probably at the bottom of the list.
Damn.
Yeah, if you're on a Necro and you just got your Ghost running and you pop a Resto ulti and you're running with your team, I think you're just going to do such a better job just absorbing damage and staying with your team and running with them and throwing out HOTS and AoE burst heals. A Templar that's standing behind to hold his ground, casting practice incantation to hold the line while everybody runs for it. It's
going to last about 2 seconds.
Yeah, you're not going to last very long, because as soon as people see you standing there, they all are like, okay, here's a target just waiting for all the AoE ground effects to be dropped on him. So easy to line up a pile of synergies on this person and just pop them.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah. There's actually, I was playing some games yesterday.
Oh.
And
like BGs?
Like top tier high end BGs. And Expose, one of our guild members, was using a Templar healer.
Oh, really?
Yes. It was okay.
I mean, he's normally on a Warden, I think, right?
He plays Warden, sometimes Necro, but he was trying out the Templar. It was okay.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that great. Long story short, it didn't really
like wow you
show
or anything.
No, there was nothing going on. In fact, as soon as he started channeling, somebody started channeling the practiced incantation, and we just all four dogpiled right on top of him immediately without any delay. We just all dogpiled on that person, and they died.
Positioning is so important in competitive PvP. Also, positioning might be the number one most important thing. And the problem, of course, with practice incantation is you just throw your positioning out the window, and you all of a sudden are put in the absolute worst position as two teams get ready to dogpile you.
Yeah. And even though you can move now, you're still snared because you don't keep your normal run speed.
You're very slow. It's as if you wasn't using Race Against Time, and they've got you snared, and you're just like slow crawling in a direction.
And what if you were actually already in a snare, like a DK Cinderstorm or whatever, like the 70%? Like you're going to be alting and moving, but you're still going to be moving at a 70% pace, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you take the largest snare that is applied. So I don't know what the practice incantation snare is, but the Cinderstorm is 70%, which is huge. Probably that's bigger than whatever the base snare of practice incantation is.
I don't actually know. I think it's either 40 or 50. I don't actually know.
Okay.
It's somewhere in that range.
Because I know you used to gain immunity to disabling effects, so I guess
you still do. I'm pretty sure.
So yeah, I think you still do. Yes.
But disabling effects would just mean like a hard stun, not an immobilization or a snare.
Right? Actually, it might.
I believe it. I believe it protects you from everything.
So yeah, I guess you wouldn't be affected by the Cinderstorm then in that case.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So just the base
40 to 50%.
Snare. Yeah. Whatever it happens to be, I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I just say snare to describe the
that's accurate.
A pace, yeah, because it's not like you're snared. It just says you can move now, but at a reduced pace, I guess, or something. I don't know what the actual thing says, but
so consensus
is
we don't like the Templar.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's too slow. I mean, technically all classes move at the same speed except Sorc, but the problem is that its abilities assume that you're standing in place, and that is the worst assumption that you can make.
Mm-hmm.
Because PvP is about mobility. It's about getting in the right positions and hitting things at the right time, and the healer needs to be right there with his team. If you're not, you're either your team's dead or you're dead.
Icy said something important earlier, which is, it reminded me, I don't know if this is exactly what he was saying, but he said something about, like, what are you bringing to your team? And so despite the fact that the Restoring Light tree and the healing abilities that Templar has is not that sexy, we don't like it, maybe there's some abilities in the other trees that are so good brought to the team that they make it worthwhile to play the healing Templar. Maybe there are some abilities in the rest of it. One of them could be Solar Prison.
Right, so Solar Prison is a good option.
The Dawn's Wrath ultimate?
Yeah. A Templar healer does have that option, that they can support their synergy team with two good synergies, one being Extended Ritual, the other being the ultimate, because that can just straight up one-shot people with a good synergizer.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The thing, and this goes into why I actually don't dislike the DK as a healer, because so many people have looked at the DK for so long, and we've all joked for forever, like, oh, a DK healer?
They scoff
what a joke.
At the DK healer.
And that is actually one reason, is the ultimate. The ultimates that are available to the DK healer, that's one reason why I actually would be okay personally running a DK healer, is because I don't think your healer should just bring heals to your team. I think you need to look at what ultimate you're bringing to your team and what other effects you're bringing to your team. And in the ultimate department for the DK, of course, you've got the Resto ulti if you want to use that. but also you've got the banner. And the banner is such a damn good ultimate. It gives your team an incredibly powerful synergy that they can use. It completely controls an area with a great amount of damage output over time. And it also brings down major defiles on people. And it is so much bang for the buck over the duration of 29 seconds versus a solar prison, where solar prison, you drop it, you like it either lands and it one shots people, or they just all walk out of it and it's like, oh damn, okay, well he's got a solar prison, it's just wasted because it didn't kill anybody, so whatever, we'll just fight over here instead. The
Well,
banner lasts and you can reposition it.
one thing I will say is that if I had to value a healer with an offensive ult, I would say that besides Sorcerer's negate, I would personally say that the Solar Prison is the second best offensive ult, just because it can one-shot entire groups of people.
It totally can, yeah.
I would probably rate it higher than the banner, but that is like a good point. Like the banner is strong, and with people having such high weapon damage now, even the healers are going over 5k. A banner from a healer would not be completely, useless like you probably would think. It would be providing additional pressure that your team could use, and you're still generating ult while using the banner too. So your team doesn't need the rest of ult. You're like max resources. You could just lay the banner down and help them finish kills with a banner that you can rotate with your, rotation. Just move it around every here and there.
What do you guys think about the magma shell on the DK compared to, say, oh man, I want to ask this question, but I don't know. We'll talk some stuff real quick. Just side conversation, but we'll still be live on the show. Do you guys want to turn this into like 6 different episodes where we kind of go in depth for each of the classes? I know we kind of did the Sorc a little bit and comparing it to the Templar, but if we're gonna go start into like the DK stuff, because that could be like a whole show in itself. Even like the Necro and the Warden and all that type of things. You think that'd be worth discussing?
There is a lot of things to talk about with each class because there's a lot of combos that can be used. There's a lot of information that can be covered.
Maybe, I mean, you could say, I don't know if you'd say like 2 classes an episode.
Yeah.
Because we did kind of cover most of like what was Sorc good for. I don't really think I have a whole lot more input that I can put on that.
Yeah, and at least like establishing a base with what to compare the Templar to in terms of like why the Templar is actually, not that good. And, I covered Necro some too, and we talked a little bit about DK, but like I could go over Necro again. Like there's a lot of points that was left behind on why Necro's good. Oh yeah, for sure.
And stuff like that.
Okay, so actually, let's do that instead. So we'll cut here. And we'll cover next week. We'll we'll do the DK and Nightblade, and then maybe like the third episode of this particular series. We'll do the pay to win classes, right? The Warden and the Necro.
Yeah.
And we can discuss that then. So that way we have, we can kind of stretch that content out, long stroke everybody, so they can, not finish too quick.
You could maybe edit this part in, I don't know, but we did forget to talk about one other support ability and why it's not good, and that's the Templar shards.
Oh, the Luminous Shards? Oh no, this is all unedited. This is gonna make it to the live.
Right. Okay,
even the part where we're just discussing what we're gonna do for the future stuff. That's all staying in here. So
all right.
But
we'll do
shards.
I just wanted to cover that, and I didn't have like an opportunity to bring it up, but because it was kind of like the last thing on my list. I kind of made like a list of things I wanted to cover, and it didn't get talked about, but I wanted to bring it up because maybe somebody's thinking, oh, but I have Luminous Shards. This is cool, right? I give my allies resource. But it's actually not cool because Luminous Shards shares the same cooldown as the orbs from the Undaunted. So what's the point in a shard that you have to cast, one time per person when you can cast one orb for everybody to hit at once, and the orb does a burst heal when
Are you
that
saying that
person
the
hits it.
synergy of shards is the same synergy for orbs?
I'm pretty sure it is,
Oh,
unless somebody wants to correct me.
it is. Are you just
Yeah,
asking for as a
I didn't
question,
know
Candle?
that. Yeah, I didn't know that actually.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah. No, it's
I
it
assumed
registers the
that they were
same.
different
You
synergies.
would assume so, but that is not the case.
Wow.
Orbs and shards shares the same cooldown. The difference is orbs is a heal over time, and it's a burst heal when they use the synergy. It also gives
Yeah,
them, you know, the resources just the same as shards.
that's
Shards
horrendous.
is one person only, and then you have to recast it if you want to give it to someone else.
That's really horrendous.
The only benefit of shards is there is a morph that will give them both mag and stam. And does orbs do that or not? Or is it just one? Do you
It's
know,
just
Icy?
one, and then you get either the burst AoE damage or the burst AoE heal,
Right. But I
which
still
is
value
equally,
that.
yeah, totally. Those AoE bursts are really valuable,
I value
especially because
that.
everybody can hit that synergy. That's like the most
Yeah.
important thing with the orbs.
I value that much higher than I do shards.
100%. Yeah,
Mm.
I don't think getting both resources even comes close to the healer only having to cast it once, getting an
I agree.
AoE heal over time and an AoE burst heal every time your allies are using it. It's just no competition.
Yeah. And again, we're strictly talking in a PvP context because I'm pretty sure in PvE world, Lumina Shards does have value because, when you're throwing orbs towards your damage dealers, then, you throw your shards for the tank as well because he's in a different location and he might need
Yeah.
resources. You don't have time for a slow ass energy orb to
Yeah.
grind its way over to the guy when he needs
Right.
resources right then and now. So it does have value in a PvE context, but again, this is a PvP
And
show. This is what
yeah.
we're talking about here.
Yeah.
What about, since we'll just go through a couple of the Templar abilities here, what about Purifying Light? That single
So-
For a
target.
healer, for a
Yes.
healer, the lingering heal that purifying light has is okay, but it's not huge. It's only
I would put it
it's
in the
like
category of being clunky because it
yeah.
follows your enemies and maybe you don't want to follow them.
And the damage that it does is totally linked to your offensive capabilities, which is insignificant on a healer.
Yeah, virtually non-existent. Yeah.
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 So again, it falls under that awkward category. Yeah, it's not a bad heal over time, but at the end of the day, you could probably fill up your bar with better stuff and call it a day. Like you don't.
Yeah.
There's no reason to really put that on there.
In terms of defensive capability, what about Living Dark?
Got nerfed.
So you don't think it's not as
I
good anymore?
I
It-
really like Living Dark, but it is very selfish.
It's that's another thing I was gonna bring up. It's very selfish. It pales in comparison to Cloak from the Nightblade, and it also pales in comparison to Mender from the Necro.
It is
Just-
very good to protect yourself, and if you decided to make your healer with a lot of support sets or maybe a lot of light and medium armor, and maybe you're a little bit on the squishier side, but you have a lot of output and support for your team, then you could slot Living Dark just as a way of protecting yourself and being able to kite out of bad situations.
Yeah.
That could potentially work, but it better work because you're slotting it, so it better work.
It will work, but the problem is that when we're talking about like why Templar is like in my opinion considered the worst healing class in the
Yeah.
game. That already comes into play because it's a lot worse than any of the other defensive tools that the other classes use. Look at Streak, look at Dark Cloak, look at Mender. Mender helps your allies too.
Yeah.
And it's like superior in terms of defensive quality in comparison to
Well,
Bubble.
in open world 1vx, Living Dark is amazing. but this is more focused on healers, dedicated healers,
Yeah.
and that's maybe why Living Dark fails for the dedicated healer. If you're a 1vxer on your Plar and you like to 1vx and you're getting hit by like 5 enemies that are trying to kill you, you can pop on your Living Dark and pop some burst heals on yourself and race against time, and you'll be able to kite those guys and get out of that position. But that's in a 1vx build. That's not how things are going to work when you're a dedicated healer in a team.
Yeah. Because I kind of think about it similar to how Shimmering Shield functions in terms of like, a selfish defensive ability that you could use. But, since I love the Warden so much, I hold much more value in Shimmering Shield just because, if it's very situational, of course, right? Where if, say, Magio is running a Sork and he's on the enemy team, then you better be damn sure I'm going to be running Shimmering Shield because he's going to be focusing me as a healer, and I don't have to really worry about him, spamming all his projectiles at me because I can just instantly negate them, and I get the major heroism, which allows me to use my ultimate to heal my team more. So there's a lot of value, I think, in that one, whereas, Living Dark, yeah, it's a heal. That's about it.
Yeah, it's a heal, a little bit of a snare.
Shimmering Shield's amazing if you know you're going against ranged players, but if you don't know what you're going up against, then it could be kind of a wasted slot.
Well, that's like it's actually not that bad because if if you're in BGs, you can just look at the players' names and what class they're playing. And if you're in Cyrodiil, you're almost guaranteed to get value out of it because Cyrodiil players use a lot of ranged.
Yeah, and even if you're not using it, it still has a slottable 500 armor, which still counts, right? Because I think it's 660 armor is 1% mitigation.
Correct.
So
you're about
almost a percent.
It's about 0.8, which is better than a reinforced heavy chest.
Yeah.
So I guess we're really driving the point home that I'm not liking where this is going. I don't want to say it.
Is it becoming hard to defend the Templar now that we've really begun to dig the grave?
Even the resurrection speed isn't going to bring the Templar out of this.
I still think it's fun.
I could also just slot the Necro one instead.
But that's it's an instant res. It's an ultimate. It costs 325 or 350, something ridiculous. But I can res somebody in like a second or less.
I'll tell you. We yesterday we had an issue where 2 people were dead, and we were like 5 versus 13. We still won the fight without the 2 people that were dead. It was like a guild versus a guild, but it would have been a lot easier if one of our Necros had the instant heal because nobody could res. As soon as you even attempted it, you just get instantly bashed. No amount of increased res speed was going to work. There was just no way. Mm-hmm. And they were too, on top of you to do anything.
Yeah, we were just surrounded by overwhelming players.
The only way to have res them would have been a Necro.
Yeah.
And, of course, you'd have to conveniently be a Templar running Spirit Mastery. Of course, you got the class passive as part of the Templar, running Kagranat Soap, and hopefully you're Alliance War 10, so you're getting both levels of that resurrection speed, because that's where you get the maximum value of being able to res somebody in less than 1 second on the Templar. But if you don't have all those things combined, like I said, you got to build for it. Then it's just
you're building for failure. You're building for failure at that point.
Oh Lord!
I think I actually would like to see some people with those around, like just as a fun little, like a build that is fun to have around. Like I would like to see some of those because I think that they could pull off some sneaky little reses here and there. But again, I don't think it's the end all be all. I think you're better off to just do something else if you're really trying to be the best.
Kando, since you mentioned like sneaking around, I've actually ran that in our groups like in Cyrodiil. Like whenever if you ever see me on a Templar, I'll usually have like Kagrenax Hope like backbarred or something, and I'm testing something on the front. Just because I think you or Camera's got Rallying Cry, Shotty's got the triple buff set, so I don't really need to provide any more overlap than that. So I just kind of bring something that I'm kind of testing, and I will have Kagrenax Hope backbarred. And I know when was it Infernoso or Death Marcher, I think he's going by, right? Whenever he's going in, if say we go in and it ends up badly, I can get him back up, no problem. Like
I think
really
also with
quickly.
the stage 4 vamp, if you were a stage 4 vamp too, while your team is kiting around and playing defensively, if you are able to sprint and get into stealth with your stage 4 vamp, you probably could sneak over to that body, and with that increased res speed, probably pull off a sneaky little res and be able to do it. I think you could pull it off.
So, have we determined that Templar healer is the Zergling healer then? Because the ultimate benefits when you're in a giant Zerg, and then the res speed benefits when you're in a giant Zerg, but
Yes,
It's
because
it's
you
the
have
ninja resurrector.
so many bodies, body blocking you that you only need you only need 1 second, and then you're good. So yeah, no, if you're running like Zerg, like 12-man groups, then, having one Templar with either a back bar or a front bar, I mean, it's got a, full 5-piece worth of stats that you could utilize. I think that would be
Yeah.
a good context. But if you're running like small scale, I would not run.
yeah.
I would not be
Which-
trolling around running this.
I mean, I'm going to be honest, I don't really view like Zerging as a very high tier PvP. I consider it a very low tier PvP. I also don't think ball groups, like actual, professional ball groups, they probably don't run Templar healers, to be honest. I don't know, but they probably don't.
No, definitely not. No, I think they have like maybe one Templar just to provide the minor sorcery, and that's about
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And so, and you don't, Templar is just never going to be desirable as a healer in BGs or any small group content. So I would say outside of a very low tier type of PvP, which is just Zerging, it's not really that useful as a
Yeah.
healer.
I
Yeah,
will
I'm not a
say
fan.
another context in which I like to run the Kagrenax Hope, we'll just say the Resurrection build is during Mid-Year Mayhem or the Imperial City events, because of course everybody and their mother is coming to PvP now because they want to get their tickets and
Yeah.
all that stuff, right? And you're going to be going on Zerg action for like 2 weeks straight, and your team is going to get killed, everyone's going to get killed. So there's a lot of value there with all the amount of bodies and a lot of people dying that you can res and get up back in the fight, no problem. So that's the only time I really would run something like this. Otherwise, you would never catch me running this, all other times of the year.
New title, Templar is the Zerg healer.
Otherwise, don't bring it to the party because we don't want it.
Dead class unless it's in Zergs.
Jesus Christ.
As
Okay,
a healer.
as a healer, yeah.
As a healer.
And so the last skill, then we can wrap up here. The Radiant Glory or Radiant Oppression, using the Execute as a form of utility. What do you guys think about that? Being able to secure kills as a Templar healer or Templar support.
So if you've got like versatile stats, like if you have all healing percentages, if you're using the Ritual Mundus and all your stats are dedicated to healing buffs, your Radiant Oppression is not going to hit very hard. It's going to be a wet noodle. If you're focused on versatile healing, like you're dedicated to spell power, max mag, and stats, you might be able to pull it off.
I think if you plan to use it, you could as a healer. It wouldn't be the worst idea. But at that point, I would say, why don't you consider becoming a 50-50 ranged Templar?
Yes.
You would probably find more value in that once you can start considering things like the Execute and potentially other tools. You could just say, all right, I just want to be like, I want to, like throw my javelins. I want to,
And by
use the
50-50,
Execute.
you mean by having 50% damage, 50% healing. So you've got hots,
Yeah.
you've got dots, you've
You
got
know,
burst heals and burst
that
damage.
that actually reminded me something we forgot about is the minor protection that Templar has. I just want to, go over this quickly. But there's no Templar ability out there that is good for a healer to use that activates this regularly and isn't overly costly. The best thing is Javelin, but that's an offensive ability mostly. I don't really like using stuns on healers. I prefer, just having good movement speed and healing and damage mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
And the passive only lasts 5 seconds, so it's very costly to keep up. And I don't think it's a good passive for a healer.
Yeah. Whereas, like with the Warden, just cast your armor buff and you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you're a Nightblade, your cloak.
Ward.
Yeah.
Yeah. All those other things are better. The Templar, the most defensive ability that you get in that tree is the ward,
And
the
it
Radiant
sucks.
Ward or the Blazing Shield. But the problem with it is that a lot of the price of that ability is put into the fact that it also does damage. And it's very rare that that damage is going to do anything for you at all. Like, when is the last time you guys maybe remember the Blazing Shield Templars that used to exist? It was kind of a fun little thing that existed a long time ago. The Blazing Shield Templars, max HP, mag recovery, and they would just basically use Blazing Shield. And before people knew what they were doing, some idiots would die to the Blazing Shield because they just wouldn't stop attacking and they didn't realize that there was reflect damage associated with it. But these days, nobody dies from reflect damage. And if they do, they're probably an NPC.
It's not good for a healer. I would basically summarize it.
Yes,
I
a
wouldn't.
lot of the value of that ability, a lot of the cost of that ability is the damage, and you're not getting anything out of the damage. Like, nobody is getting really hurt by the damage of Radiant
In general,
Ward.
shields are bad these days.
Mm-hmm.
I like Radiant Ward. I wish it was better because I would love to use it, but it's just, it doesn't have enough value.
Does it? So when you say that reflective damage, is it similar to how Harbinger works?
No,
there's two different morphs. One morph, when you cast it, it does a burst of damage immediately. That's Radiant Ward. And then the other morph is called Blazing Shield, and that does damage at the end of the 6 seconds. The shield bursts and explodes based on the amount of damage that came in. That's more like reflect damage.
Oh, okay, copy. Okay, kind of similar to how I think Leona works over in League of Legends. I think almost every show I mention League of Legends for some comparison. Because there's like the Templar is literally Leona with especially that Radiant Ward ability, which is kind of funny, but
I feel bad for Leona then if she's a Templar.
oh, but in League of Legends, she's really great. She's really strong as a melee support tank. Oh yeah, she's got her ultimate is Nova. She's got that Radiant Ward. Then she has a single target. She's got the Power Slam, the Reverberating Bash, like the stun there, and then she's got a Gap Closer, which is kind of like a Javelin, but think of it more like a DK chains, but with a javelin toss on it, right? So if it hits somebody, she teleports to that target. So kind of like how the dual wield thing works. And what's her other ability? QWER. Yeah, so yeah, 4 abilities, that right there. And her passive, whenever she light attacks somebody, no, not light attacks, whenever she uses an ability on that person, your ally does bonus like magic damage to the target, which scales off of how Leona is built. So that would be kind of cool if every time one of your Templar abilities hit a target, then that target takes some sort of extra magic damage or flame damage or something like that. I think that might be a cool little supportive kick to always want a Templar in your team or something like that, because you'd always be getting extra damage from whoever the Templar was focusing. So
they need to add that into the Restoring Light tree, and then we might have something.
Yeah, well, I would think it would be under Dawn's Wrath, maybe. Yeah. Because you'd have to do damage with your abilities to get it to work. But then even then, right, are you a healer at that point? Probably not. You're some weird, like, support, offensive support type of thing, which not really doing too much healing in some weird way. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I just saw one more ability. Okay, last one, then we'll close. Dark Flare. Now, I don't really have anything good to say about this because Major Defile is nice, but I know we've been doing it all day today. There's much better forms of Major Defile that you can get elsewhere because, this one is a single target and it can be dodged, which sucks. And
it has a channel too.
And it channels, which is another no-no. And when I look at, I'm just going to use the Warden because that's my favorite. I could just throw down freaking Corrupting Pollen, which now has minor cowardice, by the way. All right. And then, I can easily reposition that as the fight moves along. Say we're just like 2v1ing some person, right? I can easily maintain 100% uptime of Major Defile on that guy just by moving it wherever he's moving the whole time, right? It's like very easy. Whereas, Dark Flare, freaking people dodge roll all the time. And it's just like, Jesus, man, why am I even using this ability?
As a healer, I wouldn't see a point. What are you doing using the damage ability?
What are you doing?
The damage it's not going to do any damage when you're on a healer. And again, like you said, the target is the enemy. So if they dodge roll it, the fact that it has an 8-meter AoE is completely negated. The 8-meter AoE is obliterated, and it takes no effect if the target dodge rolls, and a lot of people dodge roll flares. It's so telegraphed. Or they bash it because it's also telegraphed that you're casting it, and once people know that you're doing it, they'll constantly bash you.
Yes.
Or crushing shock.
Yeah, I think you're more likely to get crushing shocked, interrupted.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess that kind of wraps it up for this episode. I'm not happy at all with what I learned today because I remember when I first was signing up to Elder Scrolls Online back in September 2019, and I was, I'm a healer main. That's always been my thing. And when I was reading everything, looking back now, I'm like, you know what? They were trying to sell me on a Lamborghini, and I bought a lemon.
You know what I see? Shoddy, what was your first character on PCNA in Elder Scrolls?
A Templar.
Hey, guess what? My first character was a Templar too. For the first 2 years, I was on a Templar. So you're talking to Templar mains here.
Jesus.
I played Templar for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
As a damage dealer, but still.
Yeah, I still play my Templar. I've played my Templar as a dedicated healer. I've played it as a DPS. I've done a lot of things with it over the years. But yeah, we all started as Templar mains.
And now look at us. We were born into the blue pill world, and now we've taken the red pill, and we don't even go back anymore. Jesus.
My Templar hasn't been logged in for PvP in the past 4 months.
Damn. Yeah, mine is still my main, but I guess nowadays technically any of my characters can be my main because they all pretty much caught up to her. But I still have more screen time, and all my thumbnails, she's on most of them because she's my that's my girl. But oh well. Okay, so I guess consensus is I'm disappointed that I bought a lemon 2 years later, and I guess the Templar is...
It has a place.
It has a place.
In the healing.
It has a place. Just don't bring a healer because we didn't ask you to.
Unless you're a Zergling.
Unless you're a Zergling, yes. Yes, then it's fine. But if you want to break away from the Zergling mentality, then probably branch away and use maybe one of the pay-to-win classes as a Warden or a Necro, or maybe even the Nightblade.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so that will conclude episode 4 as healer theory. We'll do, we'll catch guys next episode, next week, 2 weeks, and we'll see what happens. And maybe, whatever. We'll figure out what we do next time. But there's definitely going to be a part 2 and part 3 to this because we'll do the other classes as well. So look forward to that. And yeah, we'll catch you guys on the next one. See ya.
Bye. Thanks for letting me shatter your Templar dreams.